Hey, welcome to Sermon Slice. This is Sermon Slice, a portion of Sunday's message for a weekday application. And we're talking about Sunday, April the 5th, Palm Sunday. And here at Hillside, it was a great day for us to gather together. We enjoyed having the children at the beginning of our service. We moved towards a time of communion where families could participate in communion together. And then I was bringing a message on Sunday, which is the third part of this series we called Prepare the Way. 2 weeks ago, we looked at Mary and her lavish love in abandoning what was most important to her in giving it to Christ. Then last week, we looked at Judas, and we understood a little bit more about how guilt can overwhelm somebody. And we discovered how important it is to know the difference between guilt and godly sorrow. This week I was looking at the life of Peter, and Peter is one that we often talk about in the New Testament because of his leadership, because of the many stories in which he shows up, and we were trying to determine how Peter, who was so bold and such a risk taker, and even said to Christ, if everybody else falls away, I will die for you, how he could go from the garden when they came to arrest Jesus and he stood strong and he was so bold in that situation. How could he just hours later deny Christ? And how could the wheels come off for him in such a short period of time when he was such a vocal leader and so loyal to Christ? Well, what we tried to examine is that all of us as human beings are going to have those times when, even with the greatest intentions, we fail and we miss the mark. And we are like Peter. On the one hand, we say we will never back away from Christ, and yet all of a sudden we find ourselves just with the wheels completely off the cart. Well, one of the things that I think is very important, and I tried to emphasize it more yesterday, is so many times the countenance and the body posture of when we fail is our face is down and our eyes are downcast. We don't want to look into the face of others because of our failure. But in the scripture, it said that Jesus looked back at Peter. Now you might interpret that according to people in our day and age as a look of disgust or a look of, I told you so, Peter. I told you that you would deny me. But that doesn't follow the character of Christ. It follows more that Jesus would look back to Peter and say, I'm still drawing to you. I want you. I'm not abandoning you for what you've just done. And so that's such an important thing, because when we don't want to face people in the midst of our failure, we need to be reminded that God has not abandoned us. He has not left us. And even though we might feel like the wheels have come off, God is still reaching to us. In fact, we learned that Peter was one of the first disciples that Christ met after his resurrection, and it says in the scriptures that Jesus appeared to Simon Peter. And so we have to believe that Christ is always continually looking to us, even in the midst of our failure and the ways that we disappoint him. We also discussed some ways in which we can reestablish the relationship. I encourage you to listen to the podcast or to maybe even request the note guide so that you can see what those steps are, and that will help you in reestablishing the relationship if there has been a failure, if you feel like you have let God down or let someone else down and you need to reestablish the relationship with God or with others. Then there are some practical steps that the scriptures talk about of how we can reestablish that relationship. Well, I thank you for tuning in this week on Sermon Slice. I pray that this week will be a week of you looking over your life, and maybe there have been a few times when you would say, man, I missed it, and I really feel bad about that. And that failure in my life, maybe it even still lingers, and I haven't gotten past it. Maybe this week would be a week where you would say, it's time for me to get back on track. It's time for me to get back onto the field or onto the road of life that I can go forward. I don't want to stay stuck anymore with the failure that happened. I need to see something change, and maybe this week will be that week. If there's ever a time when you can believe in the resurrection power of Christ to make a change in our lives, it's this week of Holy Week. As we prepare for Easter, I pray that you will experience the power of God working in you transforming you, changing you, helping you to get back on track, especially if there has been a failure that you have not been able to get past. Hey, thanks for checking into Sermon Slice, and we will see you next week.